The chamber stretched vast and gleaming before Ambassador Sarah Mitchell as she stood at the center of the Galactic Council's Grand Hall on Station Unity, the political heart of known space, where 12 species had gathered to maintain what they called eternal peace. The architecture alone spoke of civilizations, millions of years old, with walls that shifted colors according to the mood of debates and floors made of materials Earth scientists couldn't identify even after months of study. Sarah had prepared for this moment her entire career, rising through Earth's diplomatic corps with singular focus on this day when humanity would take its rightful place among the stars. Behind her stood Commander James Rodriguez and Dr. Lisa Chun, the other members of Earth's delegation, both wearing their formal uniforms with the blue and green emblem of United Earth proudly displayed. The Chthon representative rose first, his forearms spreading wide in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of dismissal rather than welcome among his kind. His scales gleamed purple under the station's artificial light, and his 3 eyes fixed on Sarah with something she recognized instantly as contempt. "The Council has reviewed Earth's petition for membership," he announced in perfect English, his translator implant making his voice sound almost human, but with an underlying hiss that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "We find your species lacking in the fundamental qualities required for participation." In galactic governance, Sarah kept her expression neutral, even as anger flared in her chest, but she maintained her composure, because that's what diplomats did. "Might I ask on what basis the Council reaches this conclusion?" she replied calmly and professionally. The Chthon's mouthparts twisted into what might have been a smile on a creature with such alien features. "Your species has engaged in continuous warfare for its entire recorded history," he said, and gestured to a holographic display that appeared above the center podium, showing images of Earth's conflicts from ancient battles to modern wars. "You have nearly destroyed your own planet multiple times through nuclear weapons and environmental devastation, and you have yet to achieve true unity even among your own kind." A Vexler representative, resembling a floating jellyfish with bioluminescent patterns, pulsed in agreement. "The primitive nature of humanity is evident," the Vexler said through its own translator, and its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "You achieved faster than light travel only 43 of your years ago, through reverse engineering a crash probe rather than through your own innovation." Sarah felt James tense beside her, but she placed a subtle hand on his arm to keep him calm, because losing composure now would only prove their point. "Every species in this council began somewhere," Sarah argued, and her voice carried across the vast chamber. "The Torvanian Empire fought 3 civil wars before achieving unity, and the Shrell Collective nearly went extinct twice from internal conflicts according to your own histories. That was millions of years ago," snapped a Shrell representative, their crystalline body refracting light in sharp angles. "We evolved beyond such barbarism, but you humans still celebrate your warriors and build monuments to your wars." The debate continued for hours, with Sarah presenting Earth's achievements in art and science and philosophy, but the Council remained unmoved because they had already made their decision before she even entered the chamber. Finally, the Council chair, an ancient being called a Luminar, whose energy form barely held cohesion, spoke in a voice that resonated directly in Sarah's mind. "The Galactic Council denies Earth's petition for membership," the Luminar announced with finality. "Furthermore, we find that humanity poses a potential threat to galactic stability if left unmonitored." Sarah's blood ran cold at those words because she recognized the implication immediately. "What exactly does that mean?" she demanded, and her diplomatic mask finally cracking. The Chthon representative stood again, with all 4 arms now clasped in front of him in a gesture Sarah knew meant the discussion was over. "The Chthon Empire, as the military protectorate of the Council, will assume oversight of the Sol system," he declared. "You will submit all military vessels for inspection and decommissioning. You will provide full access to all technological research, and you will accept Catharn advisors in all positions of governmental authority. You're demanding we become a vassal state, James said and stepped forward despite protocol. We're offering protection, the Catharn corrected with that twisted smile returning. Your species clearly cannot be trusted to govern itself responsibly. Sarah's mind raced through options, but she knew Earth had no leverage here because the Council's combined military forces could reduce Earth to ash in days if they chose. We need time to present this to our government, Sarah said, and tried to buy time for Earth to prepare. You have 30 of your days to comply, the Catharn said. Failure to do so will be met with appropriate measures. The delegation returned to their shuttle in silence because there was nothing to say that wouldn't be monitored by Council surveillance once they cleared the station and activated their encrypted communications. James exploded. They planned this from the start, he said, and slammed his fist against the bulkhead. The whole membership process was a trap to justify their takeover. Earth needs to know immediately, Lisa added while already composing the priority message to be sent the moment they were in range of human relays 28 days later. Sarah stood in the same chamber for what she hoped would be a different outcome, because surely the Council would see reason Earth had mobilized every diplomatic channel and contacted sympathetic species and even offered technological exchanges. But nothing changed the Council's position. The United Earth government rejects the Council's demands, Sarah announced, and her voice steady despite knowing the consequences. We are a sovereign species, and we will not submit to occupation. The Catharn representative seemed pleased by this response, as if he had hoped for defiance. Then you leave us no choice, he said 20 hours after Earth's delegation departed Council space. The Catharn Third Fleet appeared in orbit around Mars and opened fire on Mars colony without warning or final demands. The Viewer settlement housed 50,000 civilians, including families and children and scientists who had spent decades terraforming humanity's neighbor world into something resembling Earth. The attack lasted 6 minutes because that's all the time it took for the Catharn to demonstrate their point. When it was over, Mars colony was a crater, and 50,000 humans were dead. Vaporized by weapons, humanity had no defense against. Sarah watched the footage in her quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel as it raced back to Earth, and she saw the orbital bombardment reduce years of human achievement to molten rock and ash. The Catharn commander broadcast a message to all human vessels and settlements across the Sol system. This is the consequence of defiance, he said with no emotion in his translated voice. Submit to Council authority, or more colonies will share this fate. Sarah prepared Earth's final response to the Council with shaking hands, but not from fear anymore, because something had changed inside her. During those 6 minutes, she recorded the message herself, because the Secretary General agreed that she had earned this right after enduring the Council's contempt. Members of the Galactic Council, she began, and her eyes hard as diamonds. You have made a grave mistake today because you believe you have shown humanity its place in the galaxy through force and terror. She paused and let the weight of her next words sink in. But you have actually taught us something far more valuable, and that is that the galaxy respects only strength and has no room for mercy or justice. The Catharn representative appeared on her screen with that same twisted smile. Is this your surrender? He asked mockingly. Sarah's expression didn't change as she delivered her final statement. No, she said quietly. This is your warning, because Earth remembers, and Earth will have justice for our dead. Not through your laws or your council, but through our own methods. The Catharn laughed, and it was a sound like breaking glass. Your primitive species threatens the might of the Catharn Empire, he said with amusement. We have conquered 1,000 worlds, and your Earth will be the 1,001st. Sarah ended the transmission without another word. because there was nothing left to say to beings who understood only power as her ship approached Earth. She could see the orbital shipyards, already working at maximum capacity, and the asteroid belt mining operations running non-stop with every resource. Humanity possessed being directed toward a single goal. Commander Rodriguez found her staring out the viewport at Earth's blue and green beauty. They think we'll surrender or die quietly, he said. Sarah shook her head slowly. They have no idea what they've unleashed, she replied. They've spent millions of years becoming civilized and comfortable, and they've forgotten what species are capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. What happens now? Lisa asked from the doorway. Sarah turned to face them both with resolve hardening her features. Now we remind the galaxy what humanity does best, she said. We survive, and we make our enemies regret ever hearing the name Earth. 18 months had passed since the Mars massacre, and the Galactic Council believed their problem with humanity had been resolved through Fearchthon patrol ships moved through the outer Sol system with casual arrogance while their commanders filed reports about the primitive species that had finally learned its place in the cosmic order. What the Council didn't know was that Earth had gone completely silent, not from submission, but from preparation in the depths of Earth's oceans and in hollowed-out asteroids and on the dark side of Luna. Humanity worked with purpose that bordered on obsession. Admiral Chen Jiang stood in the command center of Orbital Defense Station Armstrong and surveyed the holographic displays showing Earth's transformed military infrastructure. Chen had spent 30 years in various planetary defense forces before the Chthon attack, and now at 54 years old, he commanded what many called humanity's last hope. Admiral. The final squadron reports ready for deployment, reported Captain Maria Santos from her station. Chen nodded, because every piece was falling into place after months of desperate preparation. The United Earth government had done something unprecedented in human history by dissolving all national militaries and combining them into a single unified force with one mission and one enemy. How many ships do we have combat ready? Chen asked, though he knew the numbers by heart. 247 capital ships, 800 destroyers, and 3,000 smaller craft. Santos replied, it's a fraction of what the Chthon Third Fleet alone possesses, but it's what we have. Chen smiled grimly, because numbers told only part of the story, and humanity had learned to compensate for technological inferiority with something the galaxy had forgotten. Dr. Marcus Webb entered the command center carrying a datapad with the latest intelligence reports. Webb had been Earth's leading xenotechnology expert before the war, and now he led the reverse engineering efforts that had become humanity's greatest weapon. Admiral, I have the final analysis on Chthon shield frequencies, Webb said with barely contained excitement. We can exploit a 3-second window during their shield rotation cycle, and it's universal across all their ship classes because they use standardized technology. 3 seconds isn't much, Chen observed. It's enough if we're fast and brutal, Webb countered. The Chthon designed their systems for ship-to-ship combat with honor and rules of engagement. But we're not playing by their rules anymore. That had become Earth's strategy in simple terms, because while the Council species fought wars like chess matches with careful moves and accepted conventions, humanity approached war like a street fight with no rules except survival. Chen walked to the tactical display showing the Chthon positions throughout the Sol system. They had established monitoring stations at strategic points, believing their mere presence would keep humanity compliant. They treat this like occupation duty, Chen said. Skeleton crews, predictable patrol routes, communications sent in the clear because they don't believe we can decrypt their codes. They're not wrong, Webb admitted. We still can't break their military encryption, but we don't need to, because we've been monitoring their casual communications, and the arrogance is useful. Earth's intelligence services had spent months studying every aspect of Chthon culture and psychology and biology. They knew Catharn warriors valued personal combat prowess above tactical innovation, and they knew Catharn command structures relied on rigid hierarchies that discouraged independent thinking. Most importantly, they knew the Catharn had never fought an enemy willing to do absolutely anything to win. "Show me the primary target again," Chen ordered. The display shifted to show Bastion Prime and a massive Catharn fortress station positioned at the edge of the Sol System's heliosphere 8 housed 200,000 Catharn military personnel and served as the Third Fleet's main logistics hub. It's heavily defended, Santos noted. Shields, point defense systems, and a full battle group stationed within response range, which is why they'll never expect us to hit it. Chun replied the plan had been developed by Earth's best military minds working around the Verde Mound clock because conventional tactics would fail against superior technology, so humanity decided to be unconventional in every way possible. "We've retrofitted 30 cargo freighters with the antimatter warheads," reported Commander Jackson Lee from engineering. "Each one is piloted by volunteers who know this is a one-way trip." Chun felt the weight of that decision because asking people to die in suicide attacks went against every military tradition Earth had once honored, but the Catharn had killed 50,000 civilians without warning, so Earth's moral constraints had died with them on Mars. "The Council thinks we're weak because we value individual lives," Chun said quietly. "They're about to learn that weakness becomes strength when you have nothing left to lose." The volunteer pilots were already in position disguised as a tribute convoy because the Catharn had demanded regular shipments from Earth as proof of submission for 18 months. Earth had complied and sent resources and technology, and the Catharn had grown accustomed to these deliveries arriving on schedule. This convoy would be different. Chen reviewed the assault plan one more time because there would be no second chances. Freighters would approach Bastion Prime on their usual route, and the Catharn would scan them and find the cargo holds full of processed metals and rare Earth elements. Just like always, what the scanners wouldn't detect were the antimatter cores, hidden behind specialized shielding that Webb's team had developed. Through months of trial and error, when the freighters reached optimal range, they would detonate simultaneously and overwhelm Bastion Prime shields through sheer explosive force. Through the gap would pour Earth's assault fleet using tactics no Council species had ever encountered. "Sir, we've received the final authorization codes from Earth Command," Santos reported. "All units are green-lighted for Operation Mars Vengeance." Chun took a deep breath, because once this began, there was no turning back. Earth would either prove it could fight on equal terms with galactic powers, or it would be annihilated for its defiance. "Signal all commands," Chun ordered. "Execute on my mark." Across the Sol System, human forces moved into position with practiced precision. The tribute convoy accelerated toward Bastion Prime right on schedule, while Earth's attack fleet hung back in the shadow of Saturn's rings waiting for the signal. Chun watched the countdown timer tick down and thought about the 50,000 dead on Mars and about the Catharn commander who had laughed at Sarah Mitchell's warning. "They wanted to teach us our place in the galaxy," Chun said to no one in particular. "Time to teach them about human nature." The convoy crossed into Bastion Prime's scanning range, and Catharn sensors swept the ships with routine boredom. Chun could imagine the Catharn officers barely glancing at their displays because primitive humans pose no threat to the mighty Catharn Empire. "Convoy is locked on approach vector," Santos reported. "Bastion Prime has cleared them for docking." "How long until detonation range?" Chun asked. 4 minutes 30 seconds. Santos replied while watching her console with intense focus. Chen activated the fleet-wide channel so every human ship could hear his words. "All units. This is Admiral Chun," he began. "In 4 minutes we strike the first blow in Earth's war for survival, and the Catharn believe they broke us on Mars, but they only forged us into something harder." He paused and let his words sink in. "We don't fight. for territory or resources or glory, and we fight for every human who died on Mars and for every human who will ever live under Earth's sun, because if we fail today, our species ends. The channel remained silent because every person on every ship understood the stakes. Remember what they did. Chun continued. Remember that they gave us no mercy and no quarter and no chance to surrender, so we give them the same. Because this is not a battle between civilizations anymore, but this is survival, and in survival, there are no rules except victory or extinction. 2 minutes to detonation range. Santos called out. Chun's hands gripped the railing in front of him hard. Enough to hurt because the waiting was always worse than the fighting. Sir, we're detecting increased Cathon communications from Bastion Prime, reported the signals officer. There. Ordering the convoy to halt for additional inspection. Chun's heart rate spiked because if the Cathon discovered the antimatter cores now, the entire operation would fail. Convoy commander, maintain current speed and acknowledge their order, but request clarification. Chun ordered through the secure channel. The seconds stretched like hours while the convoy continued its approach, and the Cathon transmitted their inspection demands. 1 minute to optimal range. Santos said, and her voice tight with tension. The Cathon were powering up their tractor beams to force the convoy to halt, and Chun realized they had somehow gotten suspicious. All freighters, execute now. Chun ordered and abandoned the careful. Timing 30 cargo ships simultaneously detonated their antimatter cores in a blast that registered on sensors across 3 star systems. The shockwave hit Bastion Prime shields like the fist of an angry god, and the energy output exceeded the station's defensive capacity by orders of magnitude. Shield generators overloaded and exploded while the outer hull buckled under forces it was never designed to withstand. All units, engage. Chun roared. Earth's assault fleet burst from concealment at maximum acceleration with weapons already hot and targeting solutions locked. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives from 12 species shouted over each other in a dozen different languages, while their translators struggled to keep pace with the verbal fury-high Chancellor Vormus of the Cathon. Empire stood at the center podium with all forearms trembling in barely controlled rage as holographic footage of Bastion Prime's destruction played on repeat across every display surface. 200,000 Cathon dead. Vormus roared, and his voice cutting through the cacophony. An entire fortress station reduced to debris by these primitives, and you dare question my demand for total retaliation. Ambassador Tylana of the Shrell Collective shimmered with agitation as her crystalline body refracted light in sharp and angry patterns. The Cathon provoked this response by destroying Mars colony. She argued, your empire's arrogance created this situation. We were enforcing council directives. Vormus shot back. The humans refused to submit to lawful authority, so we demonstrated the consequences of defiance, as is our right under council. Military protocols. The Luminar chair tried to restore order, but its energy form pulsed with an uncertainty that betrayed how unprecedented this situation had become. The council must respond with unity. The chair intoned, humanity has violated every principle of civilized warfare through suicide attacks and cyber weapons and psychological torture. Chen Jiang watched the council session unfold from his command deck aboard the UE's Indomitable, and Earth's newest and most powerful warship, because humanity had tapped into council communications weeks ago. They're terrified, observed Captain Santos with grim satisfaction. They should be, Chen replied while studying the tactical map showing Cathon fleet movements across 3 sectors. We've proven their technology isn't invincible, and that's shaken their entire worldview. Dr. Webb approached with his ever-present datapad loaded with intelligence analysis. The Cathon are pulling forces from their border territories. Webb reported 7 battle groups converging on Sol System with an estimated arrival in 42 hours. Let them come, Chum said calmly. We're not in Seoul anymore. That was the genius of Earth's strategy, because while the Catharn expected humanity to defend its home system, Chum had taken the war directly into Catharn territory. 6. Human strike forces had deployed simultaneously to Catharn military installations across their empire's border regions with orders to hit fast and disappear before reinforcements could respond. Status report from Strike Force Delta. Santos called out. They've successfully destroyed the supply depot at Krikstar and captured 3 Catharn logistics vessels intact. Chun smiled because those captured ships would provide invaluable intelligence on Catharn supply chains and defensive positions. Earth's approach to this war differed fundamentally from anything the Council had seen in millions of years. The Catharn fought for honor and territory, while humanity fought for survival with no target considered off-limits. Sir, we're receiving a broadcast from the Catharn commander we released from Bastion Prime, reported the communications officer. Chen nodded for them to play it because he had anticipated this. The hologram showed Commander Kravath still wearing his scarred armor with the message Mars remembers visible on his chest plate. Admiral Chun of the Human Forces. Kravath began, and his voice carrying barely suppressed fury. Your cowardly tactics and dishonorable methods disgrace the very concept of warfare, but the Catharn Empire will crush your pathetic species and scatter your remains across the void. Standard posturing. Webb commented. He's trying to save face after surviving while his crew died. But Chen noticed something else in Kravath's, because beneath the anger was fear and uncertainty. The Catharn had never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules, and now they didn't know how to respond effectively. Open a channel, Chun ordered. Let's give them something else to think about. When the connection established, Chun spoke with calm authority that contrasted sharply with Kravath's bluster. Commander, I released you for a specific reason, Chun said. You need to deliver a message to your High Chancellor and the entire Catharn Empire. I will deliver nothing from humans. Kravath spat. You already have, Chun replied. Every Catharn who sees your armor sees our message, and they see that we struck at your most secure fortress and killed 200,000 of your warriors while you survived to tell the tale. Kravath. Scale shifted to a darker purple shade that Webb had identified as indicating shame in Catharn culture. But here's the part your High Chancellor needs to understand. Chung continued. Bastion Prime was just the beginning, because we have 6 more strike forces hitting your territory right now, and you have no idea where we'll attack next, because we don't fight like the civilized galaxy expects. Chung leaned forward, and his expression hardening. You killed 50,000 human civilians to make a point, so now we're making ours, and we will burn every Catharn military installation in the galaxy until you learn that humanity will not kneel. He terminated the connection before Kravath could respond because the message was complete, and now fear would do the rest. Sir, Strike Force Gamma reports successful hit on Catharn Recruiting Center at Valtorin. Santos updated. Minimal casualties on our side, but they captured the entire Catharn training staff. Excellent, Chun said. Have them transferred to the interrogation? Teams and I want to know everything about Catharn military doctrine and command structures and psychological weaknesses. Earth's intelligence services had learned something crucial about the Catharn Empire during those 80 months of preparation for all their military might and technological superiority. They were predictable because honor and tradition constrained their tactics. Karn commanders fought by established principles, and their warriors sought glorious combat, and their entire military culture valued individual prowess over strategic flexibility. Humanity exploited every one of those weaknesses without hesitation or remorse. We have incoming communication from an unknown source, the communications officer announced. It's using old Earth encryption protocols from before first contact. Chun's instincts went on alert, because that suggested someone was trying to reach Earth without Council knowledge. Put it through on a secure channel. He ordered. The hologram that appeared showed a being Chun didn't recognize from any Council species database. It resembled a serpent covered in iridescent scales with multiple sets of eyes and a mouth that moved in disturbing ways. "I am Speaker Sisizrith of the Nixkal people," the being said in heavily accented but understandable English. "My species has been subjugated by the Galactic Council for 700 years. And we have watched your war against the Cathon with great interest." Chun exchanged glances with Webb. "Because this was unexpected, but potentially valuable. What do you want?" "Speaker Sarith," Chun asked carefully, "your people fight with a ferocity that the galaxy has not seen since the Age of Conquest." Sarith replied, "You do not accept the Council's authority, and you do not bow to their military superiority, and you make them bleed." The speaker's eyes gleamed with something Chun recognized as hope mixed with desperation. "There are 17 species currently classified as protectorates under Council authority, which is their term for conquered slaves." Sarith continued, "We have no rights and no representation and no freedom because the Council claims to protect us from ourselves while they exploit our resources and our labor." Chum began to see where this was going, and the strategic implications made his mind race with possibilities. "The Council maintains order through fear," Sarah said. "They have convinced the galaxy that resistance is futile because their military power is absolute. But you have proven that lie by making the Cathon bleed and by showing that the mighty can fall." "You want our help," Chun stated. Rather than asked, "We want weapons and training and the chance to fight for our freedom." Sisrith confirmed. "In return, we offer intelligence on Council military positions and supply lines and political weaknesses that your species cannot possibly know." Webb pulled Chun aside for a quick conference because this decision would fundamentally alter Earth's war strategy. "It's a force multiplier we desperately need," Webb argued in a whisper. "If we can spark rebellions across Council space, the Cathon will have to split their forces to maintain order. It also escalates this beyond a bilateral conflict," Chum countered. "We'd be destabilizing the entire galactic order. They destabilized it when they slaughtered Mars Colony," Webb said flatly. "We're just following the logical conclusion." Chun considered for a moment longer before making his decision because Earth had already crossed too many lines to worry about one more. "Speaker Sarith, humanity accepts your offer," Chun announced. "We will provide weapons designed for your physiology along with training in unconventional warfare tactics." Sarith's entire body seemed to glow brighter with excitement and hope. "The Council will view this as an act of rebellion," the speaker warned. "We're already at war with them," Chun replied. "What's a little more rebellion between enemies?" Over the following weeks, Earth's strategy expanded from purely military strikes to something far more dangerous for the Councils. Stability human advisors made contact with subjugated species across Council territory and offered them the tools and knowledge to fight back. High Chancellor Vormis stood before the Galactic Council with his armor scorched from a recent battle, and his bearing no longer carried the arrogance that once defined Cathon authority. The emergency session had been called after 3 more Cathon military installations fell to combined human and rebel forces in coordinated strikes that demonstrated sophisticated intelligence networks. "The situation has become untenable," Vormis admitted, and the words clearly painful for him to speak. "Cathon forces are spread across 42 systems, responding to insurgencies, while human strike forces hit our supply lines with impunity." Ambassador Tylana of the Shrell Collective shimmered with barely concealed satisfaction because her species had long resented Cathon dominance within the Council structure. Perhaps the Cathon Empire overextended itself by provoking a war it cannot win. She suggested with diplomatic politeness that barely masked her contempt. The humans are primitives. Vormis snapped, though his conviction sounded hollow. They should not have the capacity to threaten a galactic power. Yet they do, interjected Consul Marvin of the Torvanian Empire. Perhaps because they fight without regard for the conventions that constrain civilized warfare. The Luminar chair pulsed with agitation as reports continued flooding in from across Council space. 17 subjugated species had openly declared rebellion, with more showing signs of unrest. Trade routes faced constant harassment from guerrilla forces. Using human weapons and tactics, Council member species were recalling their military forces to protect their own territories rather than supporting Cathon operations. The humans have weaponized chaos, observed the Vexler representative as its bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate deep concern. They have shown our subjugated populations that resistance is possible, and now the entire Council authority structure faces collapse. Vormis slammed two of his 4 fists on the podium with enough force to crack the ancient material. Then we must authorize total war, he demanded. Every human world burned, and every rebel species crushed, and every insurgent eliminated without mercy. And how exactly do you propose to accomplish this? Tylana asked. Your fleets are already stretched beyond capacity, and your logistics networks are failing, and your warrior caste is demoralized by an enemy they cannot predict. The truth of her words hung in the chamber like a physical weight because the Catharn had always been the Council's military enforcers. If the Catharn couldn't maintain order, then the entire system that had governed the galaxy for millions of years was at risk. We need Council support, Vormis said, and his tone shifting to something almost pleading. Commit your fleets to a unified campaign against the Julian Sol system, and we end this threat at its source. The representatives exchanged glances, but none volunteered their forces because each species calculated their own risks and benefits. My empire has protectorates showing signs of unrest, Consul Marvin stated. I cannot commit forces to offensive operations while defending against potential rebellions at home. One by one, the other council members offered similar excuses as the political unity that had defined the galactic order for eons crumbled under pressure from a species that had achieved spaceflight less than a century ago. Meanwhile, in the Arcturus sector, Admiral Chun commanded Earth's largest fleet yet assembled as they prepared for an operation that would either cement humanity's position or lead to its annihilation. The target was Nexus Station itself, and the capital of the Galactic Council and the symbolic heart of their authority. This is insane, Captain Santa said, though her tone carried more excitement than objection. We barely have enough ships to attack a frontier outpost, and you want to strike the most heavily defended location in the galaxy, which is exactly why they won't expect it, Chun replied while studying the tactical displays. The Council thinks we're a regional threat contained to Catharn space, but we're going to show them we can reach anywhere. Dr. Webb worked frantically on final preparations for the cyber warfare package that would be crucial to the assault. The Nexus uses quantum encrypted communications that we cannot break, Webb reported, but we've developed a virus that doesn't need to break encryption because it simply floods their network with so much data that legitimate communications become impossible. How long can you maintain the jamming? Chun asked. 30 minutes maximum before their countermeasures adapt, Webb replied. After that, we're fighting blind against superior numbers and technology. Chun nodded because 30 minutes would have to be enough for what he planned. The operation relied on intelligence, provided by Speaker Sereth and the Nixkal, rebels who had infiltrated Nexus Station support staff over decades of subjugation. They had mapped every security system and identified every defensive weakness and provided access codes that would allow human forces to bypass outer perimeter defenses. All strike forces report ready, Santos announced. We have 63 capital ships, 200 destroyers, and 400 support craft against an estimated defensive force 10 times that size, plus the element of surprise," Chun added. "The Council is so focused on their internal debates and Kathon failures that they've forgotten to watch their own capital." The Rebel Alliance had grown far beyond what Chun initially anticipated, because 18 species now openly fought against Council authority. Their forces couldn't match Council military power ship to ship, but they tied down massive numbers of vessels in garrison and patrol duties. Earth had provided weapons and training while the rebels supplied local knowledge and intelligence networks. Together they had transformed from a nuisance into an existential threat to galactic stability. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Ambassador Mitchell," the communications officer reported. "She's requesting to speak with you before we commence the operation." Chun had Sarah transferred to Earth months ago for her own safety because Kathon forces had put a substantial bounty on her head now. She served as humanity's voice in the propaganda war that raged alongside the shooting war. Hologram appeared, and Chun noticed she looked older than when they first met because the weight of this conflict had aged everyone involved. "Admiral, I wanted you to know that our diplomatic channels are reporting mass protests on Council member worlds," Sarah said. "Citizens of the Shrell Collective are demanding withdrawal from the Council, and the Torvanian Empire just recalled their ambassador. The political pressure is working." Chun observed. "Better than we hoped," Sarah confirmed. "But I also wanted to warn you that some Council species are discussing a final solution to the human problem." Chun's expression darkened because he knew what that meant. Mass extermination. He said flatly, "Complete destruction of every human world and settlement." Sarah confirmed. "They're terrified of what we represent because if one species can successfully resist, then others will follow and the entire Council system collapses. Then we better make sure today's operation succeeds." Chun replied, "Because after this, they'll either negotiate or we'll all die fighting." Sarah nodded with grim understanding and the connection. Terminated Chun addressed his fleet on the command channel as they prepared for the final approach to Nexus Station. "All ships. This is Admiral Chun with final mission briefing." He began. "In 20 minutes we will attack the Galactic Council's capital because many of you think this is suicide, and you're probably right." He paused to let that sink in before continuing. "But here's what the Council doesn't understand about humanity. And we don't accept that might makes right, and we don't bow to superior force, and we don't surrender just because the odds are against us." Chun could see his own crew standing straighter at their stations as his words reached every ship in the fleet. 50,000 humans died on Mars because the Council wanted to teach us a lesson. Chun continued, "So today we teach them one, because we teach them that humanity would rather die fighting than live on our knees. We teach them that their precious order was built on the backs of conquered species who never had the chance to fight back, but now they do because we gave them that chance." His voice grew harder with each sentence. "And we teach them that attacking Earth was the biggest mistake the Kathon Empire ever made, because we are not a peaceful species pretending to be warriors, and we are warriors who tried to be peaceful until you forced us to remember what we really are." The fleet acknowledged with a unified response that echoed across the communications network, for Earth and for Mars and for every species, that the Council crushed beneath their rule. Chun declared, "Today we show the galaxy that tyranny can bleed." The attack commenced with web cyber warfare, virus flooding Nexus Station's communication networks, and creating chaos among the defensive coordinators. Human ships emerged from hyperspace at multiple vectors simultaneously because the Council expected attacks to follow conventional approach patterns. Earth's forces came from above and below and through vectors that military doctrine said were impossible. Defensive batteries are confused, Santos reported. They're firing on each other because their targeting systems can't distinguish friend from hostile through the jamming. Chun's flagship led the charge directly toward the station's command center while smaller craft peeled off to engage defensive platforms. The rebuilt Mars colony stretched across the red planet's surface under a transparent dome that filtered the thin atmosphere and turned the harsh Martian sun into something almost gentle. 3 years had passed since the Nexus Station assault, and humanity had transformed from a species begging for acceptance into a galactic power that commanded respect through force and determination. Admiral Chun Jiang stood at the Memorial Plaza where 50,000 names were carved into black stone. Imported from Earth, each name represented a civilian who died when the Chthon demonstrated their authority, and each name reminded humanity why they fought. Admiral. The ceremony is about to begin, Captain Santa said as she approached with her new insignia, marking her as commander of Earth's 2nd. Fleetchen nodded and turned from the memorial to face the assembled crowd that included human dignitaries and representatives from 23 formerly subjugated species and reluctant council members required to attend by treaty. The Mars Memorial had become sacred ground not just for humanity, but for every species that suffered under council tyranny. Before Earth showed them resistance was possible, Ambassador Sarah Mitchell stepped to the podium, and her hair now streaked with gray, though she carried herself with the same dignity that once stood before the council's contempt. We gather today to remember not just those who died, but why they died. Sarah began, and her voice carrying across the plaza through speakers and translators. The Galactic Council wanted to make Mars colony an example of what happens to species that refuse to submit, but they succeeded in ways they never intended. She gestured to the memorial wall behind her. These 50,000 souls became the spark that ignited a revolution across the galaxy, because their deaths showed humanity that we had a choice, and we could bow to tyranny, or we could fight. The crowd remained silent as Sarah continued. The council believed their technology and their ancient authority made them invincible, but they forgot that power without justice creates only temporary peace. Chun watched the Chthon delegation sitting in the attendance section, and their posture rigid with barely contained resentment. High Chancellor Vormis had been removed from power after the Nexus assault and replaced by a reformist faction that understood the old order was dead. The new Chthon government had formally apologized for Mars and paid reparations, and begun the painful process of redefining their species' role in the galaxy. Today, Mars colony lives again, Sarah declared as the domed shields adjusted to show the thriving settlement that now housed 200,000 people. We rebuilt what they destroyed, and we did it stronger than before, because that is what humanity does when faced with destruction. And we rise from the ashes. The ceremony continued with speeches from rebel leaders whose species now sat as equals in the reformed Galactic Council. Speaker Sereth of the Nixcal took the podium, and his serpentine form moving with grace. My people lived as slaves for 7 centuries, Sereth said. We accepted our chains because the council taught us that freedom was impossible and that resistance meant death. He paused, and his multiple eyes scanning the crowd. Then humanity showed us something we had forgotten, and that fear only has power if we let it, and that the mighty can fall if enough people stand together. The Nixcal delegation rose in a gesture of respect that their culture reserved for the highest honors. Earth gave my people weapons and training, but more importantly, you gave us hope. Sereth continued. You reminded the galaxy that freedom is not granted by the powerful, but taken by the brave. Chun felt the weight of those words because the cost of that freedom had been measured in human blood. Earth's casualties from the war totaled over 200,000 military personnel, with 3 times that many wounded. Entire families had lost members in the fighting, and some colonies had been reduced to ruins before Chthon forces finally withdrew. But humanity had proven its point, and shown the galaxy that Earth would not be conquered or controlled. The reformed Galactic Council now operated under principles that Earth had forced them to accept. All species held equal voting rights, regardless of military power or technological advancement. The protectorate system was abolished, with former subject species granted full independence. Military operations required unanimous council approval, preventing any single species from waging aggressive war, and Earth held veto power, ensuring that humanity could never be outvoted on matters of survival. "Sir, we have incoming ships," Santa said quietly while checking her datapad. "The delegation from the Outer Rim territories requesting Earth's assistance with their independence movement." Chun sighed, because the galaxy had learned, perhaps too well, from humanity's example across council space. Species that had accepted subjugation for millions of years now demanded freedom, and many looked to Earth for support in their struggles. "Tell them we'll meet after the ceremony," Chun replied. "But make it clear that Earth cannot fight everyone's wars for them anymore." The truth was that humanity remained vulnerable despite its newfound power. Earth's fleet had grown substantially, with new ships incorporating captured council technology, but they still numbered fewer than half the vessels that major council species commanded. What kept the galaxy from testing Earth's strength was reputation and fear of human tactics rather than actual military superiority. The council species had seen what humanity did when pushed to desperation, and none wanted to provoke that response again. Dira Webb approached with his constant companion datapad loaded with intelligence briefings. "Admiral, we've confirmed that the Kathon militaries is reorganizing under civilian oversight," Webb reported. "Their warrior caste has been reduced by 40% and retrained for defensive operations only." "Good," Chun said, "though I'll believe the Kathon have changed when I see it proven over decades, not years. We're also receiving reports of human mercenaries operating in the frontier sectors," Webb added with concern. "Veterans who learned unconventional warfare during the conflict are now selling those skills to the highest bidder." Chun frowned, because that was an inevitable consequence of teaching an entire generation to fight without rules. Some of Earth's soldiers would return to civilian life and readjust, but others had seen too much and learned to survive through violence. "Flag it for Earth Command," Chun ordered. "We need to monitor human activities across the galaxy, because our reputation can be destroyed by mercenaries committing atrocities in Earth's name." The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for the dead, followed by a display of human military power that served as a reminder to the assembled council delegates. Earth's newest warships performed a flyover of Mars' colony with their weapon systems active and targeting solutions locked on imaginary threats. The message was clear, because humanity remembered Mars, and humanity would ensure it never happened again. As the crowd dispersed, Chun found himself alone at the memorial wall, running his fingers over the carved names. He knew many of these people personally, because Mars Colony had been a close community before the attack. Scientists and engineers and families who came to Mars seeking adventure and opportunity, but found death instead. "You carry a heavy burden," said a voice behind him. Chun turned to find Ambassador Taylana of the Shral Collective standing with her crystalline body refracting the dome's light. "Ambassador," Chun acknowledged with formal politeness, though not warmth. "I wanted to speak with you privately," Taylana said. "The Council is concerned about Earth's growing influence, and some species worry that humanity will become the new tyrants." "We didn't start this war," Chun replied coldly. "No, but you finished it in a way that terrified the entire galaxy," Taylana countered. "Earth proved that technological superiority means nothing against enemies willing to sacrifice everything for victory." Chun crossed his arms and studied the Shral representative. "What exactly is your point?" he asked. "That power corrupts all species eventually," Taylana said. The Cathar began as noble warriors defending the weak, but over millions of years, they became oppressors who used their strength to dominate others. She moved closer with her form shifting colors to indicate sincerity. I fear that humanity may follow the same path because you have shown the galaxy that might makes right if applied brutally enough. Chun considered her words before responding. The difference is that we remember what it feels like to be powerless. He said, every human alive today knows someone who died because the council decided we didn't matter. He gestured to the memorial wall. These names ensure we never forget why we fought and what happens when the powerful abuse their authority. I hope you're right, Tylana said, because the galaxy needs Earth's strength, but it also needs Earth's conscience, and if you lose one, you may lose the other. She departed, leaving Chun alone with his thoughts and the weight of 50,000 names. The reformed Galactic Council convened the following day in a new chamber. Designed to reflect the changed order gone were the elevated seats that placed them species above others and replaced with a circular arrangement where all representatives sat as equals Earths. Delegation included Sarah Mitchell as chief ambassador, along with military and scientific advisors who understood that diplomacy now backed by force. The first order of business addressed the ongoing rebellions across former council territories. As dozens of species demanded recognition and independence,